Once upon a time in Manchester, a young lad decided to watch Once Upon a Time in America and then decided, you know what, I like movies now. Welcome to the second episode of Movies and Me. You may have seen the first episode with Billy Polahan talking Superman the movie. Now I have another guest with me who I'm very excited to talk with. He's the host of the HorrorHouse podcast and the go-to guy when you want to talk about horror movies, but this time he's chose a gangster film. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Morgan Robinson.
Hello, everyone. Yes, what a delightful intro that was. I was expecting... Yeah, that's about what I was expecting. That was a nice intro. I'm happy to be here, very happy to be here, episode 2, talking one of my absolute favourites of all time.
Yeah, you told me this was the movie that you wanted to pick, and when I saw the runtime, do you remember what my reaction was?
Yes, you did not like the runtime. Because this, of course, Once Upon a Time in America does have a 3 hour and 49-minute runtime in its true form, and it can put people off. And I could see on your face it was putting you off It was putting you off at the start, but you know, all you have to do, and I'll probably say this multiple times on this now, but ignore the runtime. I'm telling you, watch it, and obviously it didn't disappoint you, did it?
It did not, but this show's not about me, buddy. This show's about you. I want to know, Once Upon a Time in America, it's usually you're known for like picking horror films because you run the HorrorHouse podcast. What is it about this movie specifically that makes it so personal to you as a film fan?
Well, let me tell you a story. Let's go for story time, shall we?
Fantastic.
Right. When I first started really getting into film, maybe around the age of 14, and gangster films was the sort of first genre or category that I would go to first, because there are so many. Like, obviously, when you're first getting into films, you're looking at like, oh right, what do I have to catch up on over the decades and decades. You see stuff like Godfather, don't you?
Yeah.
And things like that you then go and watch. And because I still love gangster films, Goodfellas as well. Scarface was 1983. Scarface was what I consider my first quote unquote favorite film. But Once Upon a Time in America is on just another level for me in terms of it was the first film that I ever really, because like I said, Gangsters was where I really started off, so I would just watch that, exclusively. Once Upon a Time in America was the first one that I ever sort of noticed the way it was made and the way it was put together. And I really love that. I love when I can notice the cinematography in a film, or the score especially. I love when the score is noticeable. And the score for Once Upon a Time in America is, I will listen to it walking around the streets. I will just have it on in my headphones. It is a stunning score by one of the greatest ever film composers, the Italian master Ennio Morricone. Of course, the film itself is directed by Sergio Leone, who's probably more well known for his Clint Eastwood westerns, which are also excellent. But this is on a complete other level in terms of both Leone films and gangster films as it is.
Well, there's one thing I noticed right off the bat when I was watching this to prepare. Robert De Niro's performance in this is really subtle. Like, there's this one line where a guy comes up to him in a bar and asks him, "What have you been doing all these years?" And he simply responds with, "Going to bed early." So right away, we know this character is haunted by something. We don't know quite what it is yet. We'll get onto that in the later... I think this was 3 hours and 30 minutes left to go, so you can imagine what I was thinking. We're going to really delve into this guy's psyche. And when it comes to De Niro performances, where does this rank for you?
Oh, I mean, it's like the film itself, vastly underrated. because when you think of De Niro performances, the classic De Niro performances, you're thinking Taxi Driver, you're thinking Raging Bull, the really sort of powerful, big sort of performances. But like you said, his performance as Noodles
What
in
great
this
name.
is very subtle. It is a great name. But yeah, it is very subtle. It's very sort of subdued and just quiet, and you can tell there's something going on behind those eyes.
And we get to find that out 3 hours into the movie. And trust me, don't let the runtime put you off this film, because
absolutely not.
People have a thing with long movies. They always say like, "Oh, it's just too long. I don't know if I can watch this." But every scene in this is great. It unfolds so well, and it keeps you going. And I don't mind long movies as long as it's needed. If it's paced well, then I'll watch a 6-hour movie if need be. As long as you're keeping it good and the story is as long as it needs to be, not as long as like, oh, you want to fill a runtime, then I think that's what this movie does extremely well. And something I didn't expect when I was watching this movie's half a gangster movie and half a coming-of-age story. Did that surprise you when you first saw it?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I've kind of always liked because the film, as you look at it, is split into 3 time periods that are non-linear storyline.
It's very tough to pull off.
And very tough to pull off, but pulled off perfectly, if you ask me. But the storyline with the younger versions of the characters is the most entertaining, because I think it's the most funny. There is some humour in this. There is some humour in Once Upon a Time in America.
Yeah, it balances it quite well.
It's not just a hugely serious gangster epic. But yeah, I don't know. I've always loved the way they try and a bigger gangster, and then that just backfires. And then the whole thing with they put in the salt in the. They put in salt in some sort of thing to make float up. I don't know. I don't know how it works exactly, but they love doing that. And of course, let's not forget the Peggy.
So Peggy, as we know, is the character that Noodles fancies at first.
Well, I mean, he obviously has an ongoing quite a damaging love for Deborah. Of course, it played in her young version by Jennifer Connelly. It was Jennifer Connelly's first role.
And she did a great job. Like, that was a really great character. Like, she's almost the opposite of Peggy when it comes to, like, strong female characters, because Peggy knows what she wants, but, she goes about it very much in the wrong way.
Yeah, Peggy, if you have seen the film, you know exactly what we're talking about, but Peggy is the same age as these sort of presumably 14, 13-year-old boys. She prostitutes herself out, but for cake.
Yeah.
Not for money, for cake. It's weird, but it's kind of funny.
It almost kind of works with the era that the movie's set in. Like, I could see that working in something like Boardwalk Empire, which I also believe is a Prohibition era kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, but like you said, very, very different to the character of Deborah, who is, consistent in the entire film. In the later time periods, played by Elizabeth McGovern. I
wouldn't be surprised, actually, if that turned out to be Jennifer Connelly grown up, and this became like a Boyhood scenario, because they look very alike.
They do. It was good casting. It's good casting on their part. Jennifer Connelly does a great job at playing a young,
she's an aspiring actress.
Yeah, but when you get two actors playing the same role, say one's younger, one's older, it's not always the case that you can tell, like, that they are the same character. It's perfectly clear.
Yeah, it's not like Amazing Spider-Man 1.
No, it's entirely clear that Jennifer Connelly and Elizabeth McGovern are the same character. They have such the same mannerisms, way of speaking, it's just very, very well. She is McGovern has one of the strongest performances in this film, with so many strong performances. We've not even talked about the guy who I think gives the best performance in this yet.
And who is that?
Mr. James Woods.
Indeed. James Woods doesn't show up for quite a while, but when he does, he completely nails that scene that he's in. I mean, you'll know James Woods as like the voice of Hades and other great villain characters, but in this, without spoiling much, he plays a very flawed but very interesting character, and just to watch him interact with De Niro it's like the stuff made from dreams. It's incredible.
Oh yeah, I mean, his character Max and De Niro's Noodles, sort of childhood friends. You see them both again in the earlier sort of childhood storyline. But then, just to go off on a bit of a tangent here, I want to talk about some of the editing.
Go for it.
Got me thinking. Some of the cuts in this, like between time periods, I think are excellent. Like, partial spoilers when young Noodles ends up in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And then the camera just sort of, you just see the camera, it's just on the prison, and then it pans up, pans back down, and you see De Niro walk out of the prison. And it's the same character that you've just seen go into the prison.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
It's stunning, and as well, right at the start, because the film opens again, it's non-linear. It's, without watching it, it might seem all over the place, but right at the start, when the old De Niro, there's young Noodles, then normal De Niro, and then old De Niro. When old De Niro goes back to Fat Moe's, and looks through the peephole that he always used to spy on Deborah through because he's a bit of a pervert. And then what you see is you see De Niro's eye, you see old De Niro's eyes look through this peephole, you see the view of the peephole, but as it was back in the 20s, with Jennifer Connelly dancing. And then you cut back, and it's the eyes of young Noodles. Noticeable editing, but very, very, very good editing.
Yeah, and I'm just going on to another section here. When you think of gangster movies and you hear the name Bugsy, what ultimately comes to your mind?
What comes to my mind?
Yeah.
Well, it's not the film Bugsy. It would be the phenomenal musical Bugsy Malone.
That's what I was thinking too, but there's a character called Bugsy in this movie. And immediately I was thinking, okay, you're going for a lot of the gangster tropes here. We've got a guy called Fat Mo, and now we've got a guy called Bugsy, and a guy called Noodles. Yeah. But Bugsy plays a minor role as an antagonist in the coming-of-age section of this movie, and his introduction scene is one of the scariest introductions I've ever seen to a villain in any movie ever. Like, I'm talking up there with Darth Vader in the first Star Wars level good.
Yeah, it's pretty terrifying, really, because you've heard them mention Bugsy as the sort of gang leader around, the Lower East Side where they are. But, of course, when he eventually hears that Noodles and Max and Cockeye and... What do they use for... I know it's Patrick Goldberg, I can't remember. That's the character's name, but I can't remember what the nickname is.
We'll just say Patrick Goldman for now.
Once they find out that once Bugsy finds out that the gang obviously has been profiting off of, in his town, so to speak, he comes with two other guys down an alleyway and basically nearly kills them.
beats the hell out of them. Like, it's almost unsettling to watch. And I don't know the age of Bugsy exactly, but he looks like young. He looks like our age. And to imagine a guy our age beating on these kids for trying to steal his business is
Yeah.
just, it's unsettling to think about now, but back in that era, I imagine it was very common around the gangster settings.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. I mean, as at the first, the first instance he gets his brass knuckles out.
Oh, yeah. You don't want to mess with that.
It it is brutal. It is brutal. The entire film is brutal in some parts.
Oh, it's definitely not for the faint of heart. This is not like Titanic.
Don't,
This.
don't watch it with kids.
No. No, 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 no.
It will scar you. But yeah, that is, and then of course you get the beautifully shot climactic scene of the coming of age children's storyline.
I was hoping you were going to bring this up because I noticed a lot of stuff with Noodle's character in here. And just to let you guys know, there is major spoilers in this section, so skip ahead a couple minutes if you haven't seen the movie yet, or go see the movie first, watch all 3 hours and 49 minutes of it, and come back to this section because this scene we need to talk about because it's so bloody sad. And Morgan, do you want to lead this on?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it does say a lot about Noodles' character. Bringing it back to the cinematography for a moment, you get that iconic shot of them walking past the view of the Manhattan Bridge in New York. That if you go onto my Facebook page, that I'm not going to give out, but if you go onto my Facebook page, you will see a picture of me in location. That was one of the best days of my life.
I didn't know you were in Once Upon a Time in America. You've been using a time machine.
Yes.
Oh, of course. Fantastic.
But yeah, you get that, and the music's there again. The cockeye on his pan pipes, on his whatever he has, harmonica, that basically plays the main theme of the film.
Which is a really beautiful one.
It is. Like I said, I would listen to it often. And then Bugsy shows up again.
Fucking Bugsy.
And this time it ends worse.
Yeah, worse than getting the shit kicked out of them.
Yeah, for both the gang and Bugsy himself. And like you said, spoilers, the sort of, I believe his name is Dom.
Little Dominic, yeah, his name is Little Dominic.
Yeah. He's the youngest one of them. He gets shot by Bugsy, and which prompts Noodles to then just break down and grab a knife and just constantly. I don't know how many times he stabs Bugsy, but it's a lot. And then he stabs a policeman that then comes over to try and break it up, kills them both. He is just broken at the fact of losing his good friend, and that's where we see him go off to prison, of course.
That scene in particular, because you notice the other characters are just trying to run away and do nothing. Noodles is the only one who you feel like actually cares for them, whereas the rest of the gang, they may not even care for him. They might just be using him for his resources, especially when he's going away to prison. Like, they're just staring at him and they're not doing anything. And that theme is really relevant throughout the rest of the film as well, especially when we come to meet James Woods. And it makes it so much more heartbreaking. You just feel for this character so much. So if you like stories where you definitely feel for the main character, this one, give it a watch, or give it a rewatch if you haven't seen it in a while.
Yeah, that's what sets Noodles apart from the other characters, is that there's so much emotion to him, there's so much depth, like I said, behind those eyes, that James Woods' character Max has sort of an unhinged nature about him. The other two are just they're just members of the gang.
They're like lackeys.
Yeah, they're perfectly good, but they've not got the depth to them. No one's got the depth to them that Noodles has. like you said, he's the only one who seems like he cares, you know, at least more than the others in the children's section. And then, yeah, and then he gets out of prison, of course, and then we have all that, which is a massive storyline.
Him ultimately coming to grips with the things that have been haunting him for years, and he's been alone suffering in this. I don't even think we get to meet Noodle's family in this. It seems like he's very much on his own trying to make it.
Not at all. I don't think he has any family. I mean, it's a very, it's a beautifully sort of, I don't want to say depressing, thought-provoking.
That's a good word to use.
A beautifully thought-provoking film. I'm a big fan of the damaged character protagonist. I think they're the most interesting.
Well, ultimately, yeah, you get to root for them immediately if you can relate with them on some level.
Yeah, Noodles is. I mean, there are, of course, like I was saying before, gangster films were my first love when I started to love film. No character really felt as damaged or as interesting to me as Noodles did, which is why I gravitate towards this film.
Now, there's one thing in this movie that I know you wanted to bring up, and it's something that I'm very curious about myself because I didn't quite get it on first glance, but after thinking about it, it made a little bit more sense with the themes and the Shakespearean vibe of this movie. Where do you stand on the ending scene?
Yes. Well, first of all, I mean the final shot is incredible. It's just a close up of Noodles, De Niro, just smiling. This is sort of normal age De Niro as he was at the time, and it's all. If you read into, not if you read into the film, but if you read stuff surrounding Once Upon a Time in America, you'll come across a theory that everything to do with old De Niro is all an opium dream.
I could go on to that. I think from what I took from it was that he's ultimately become so haunted and almost driven insane maybe by the things he does that he has to take this drug to kind of go with it in a way, but
Exactly.
The final shot leaves a lot to be desired.
Yeah. I mean, that's why he goes to this Chinese theatre in the first place. He just wants to get away from everything. And then you get that last shot that the credits roll over of him just smiling as though everything's okay. When at that point in the chronological narrative, it couldn't be further from okay. I mean, the thought that the old De Niro storyline is a complete dream is fascinating to me, because if you notice, all his major relationships within the film with Max, with Deborah, with Fat Mo, they all come to a relatively nice end. I mean, they're all definitely given closure to, apart from obviously, does Max, or does not to spoil, right? How do I not say this by spoiling anything? Because it's not Max. Does Secretary Bailey die?
We don't know, and we never find out.
We don't know. Exactly. We never find out if Secretary Bailey dies. That's always been interesting to me. I mean, I have also. I take that one simply. I just say yeah, because that's just the easiest for me, for my brain, because of the rest of the stuff that's going on. But his final conversation with Deborah, when he learns about Max's child.
Mm-hmm. Quite heart-wrenching.
Yeah, but it's given that relationship is given nice closure, because if you remember, before that, the last time he's seen Deborah is in that taxi, and people know exactly what we're talking about if they know the film. And then Deborah leaves and becomes a big star. But, I mean, you think if this is all just a dream that he's dreamt up in order to make himself feel okay, that all his damaged relationships have come to some sort of closure, whether it's a good closure or bad, because you see him and Fat Mo, they get along again. And that's where the quote that you brought up right at the start, what have you been doing all these years, going to bed early? That's where that is.
Aye, and it really tells you a lot about Noodle's character, like I said, and even the final conversation with him and James Woods, we don't know if the character he's playing dies, but you can tell from Noodle's reaction, he's dead to him.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so tragic. Yeah. It's so Shakespearean. Like, even the title, Once Upon a Time in America, feels so timeless. And you can tell the story's clearly inspired by things like Hamlet and a lot of Shakespeare stuff.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you talk about the timeless nature. I mean, it really is. In more senses, because it also technically spans about 45 years.
Yep. But it's a movie we can revisit anytime.
It really, really is. Yeah, I just wanted to mention this whole theory of the opium dream at the end and ask people what they think about that, if they've seen it. Do they buy it? Do they not buy it? Yeah,
please leave a comment below.
Yeah. That's all I wanted. That is all I wanted to say.
This is a little feature that I have on the show now. I want you to imagine that I've never seen this movie, so take that time machine that you clearly have and let's rewind a couple days. I've not seen Once Upon a Time in America. What do you tell me to get me to watch this right now?
Oh, God, that is difficult. What do I get you to... Do you know what? I honestly think, because such a long runtime usually has a stigma behind it, people are put off by it, I would simply say this film is 3 hours and 49 minutes long, and it doesn't drag for a second. And that's all I need to say. I feel like that is all I need to say, because then you would know, people would know that, yeah, this has got to be one hell of a story then. And it
certainly is. Well, I think that's going to wrap us up. Morgan, thank you so much for joining me for this second episode of Movies and Me. Where can the good people find you, and anything you'd like to plug?
Oh, you're very welcome. It's been an absolute blast. I could have talked for another 7 hours, as always, on Twitter at the Purple Don, or subscribe to the HorrorHouse podcast on iTunes. Just type in HorrorHouse and you will find it. Got a new episode coming out this Sunday with talking the horror resurgence with host of Jesus Takes the Reel podcast, Devon Taylor, which was very fun. Yes, so follow the podcast at HorrorHouse Pod, hashtag at HorrorHouse Pod as well, all on Twitter.
And I've been a guest on Horror House quite a few times, and it's a really fun show. If you're a fan of horror in any way, we've talked stuff like Stephen King, Psycho, and we did a really epic 2-part Scooby-Doo episode, which was a hell of a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. So, and yes, that is, all up on iTunes. Give us a rate and review over there if you want to be nice on iTunes as well, because that helps a lot.
Okay, I'll give you another 5-star rating if you ask me nicely enough.
Well, yes, thank you very much.
I already have anyway. And as always, you can find me at Nolan Dean 27 and use the hashtag Movies and Me to continue the conversation, or leave us a comment below. Next week, we will be talking a movie that I've also seen for the first time very recently, Kevin Smith's Clerks, and joining me will be my good buddy and fellow filmmaker Kees Garrigan, so look out for that. And if you guys like this podcast, hit the subscribe button, and I will see you guys next time.